and welcome to the Momversation Club. I'm Claire Strong.
And I'm Christina Struckmeyer. We're two moms just like you, navigating the nitty-grittiness of modern motherhood and taking you along with us as we talk about the things that nobody's talking about.
Today we're going to be talking about how to talk to your kids about neurodivergence and create a more inclusive environment for children with disabilities.
And now a quick break in the Momversation to bring you a word from today's sponsor.
Sometimes being a mom can feel overwhelming, and being a mom of a child with special needs, well, that doesn't come with a manual, or so we thought.
Today's sponsor is Flourishing Families, the annual special needs digital guide and online resource database from the Special Needs Resource Foundation and San Diego Family Magazine.
This one-stop shop provides a comprehensive resource list with access to over 1,000 options, including service providers, camps, therapists, advocates, and much more for families with disabilities in San Diego and Imperial County.
Flourishing Families also offers informative articles and helpful tips for parents just like us. Click the link in our show notes or visit snrfsd.org to explore these valuable resources today.
Hi, Christina.
Hey, Claire, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I like what you're wearing today. What have you got on?
Thank you. For those who are watching the visual, I am doing my whole Christina, I guess this is a signature look now, because this is the second cold season of our recordings. I've done this thing since like middle school where you take your sweater and just put it on your arms because my arms get cold, but not my back. I don't know what that's about.
Oh my God, yeah. Do you know what? I've never seen anyone do that until you.
Well, I mean, I'm a trendsetter. I don't think I'm the one who invented this, but I'll take it.
You're a unicorn. Well, I have strategically placed the microphone for anyone watching on YouTube because I have this very demure dress on, which I wear for work occasions, but it's got this ridiculous gap. And if you're not careful, you can see a little bit too much cleavage, if you know what I mean. So my microphone is strategically placed to keep this a family-friendly show.
I like how we're revealing all of our behind the scenes for you people.
Oh yeah, we're raw and gritty here at the Momversation Club.
Oh my God. Well, Claire, I am so excited about today's topic because we were just chatting it up about this off the cuff during our normal conversations because outside of recording this, we actually chat quite a bit. And it's something that I have always kind of, since I've gotten my daughter's diagnosis done, but now that my daughter is in a mainstream class a little bit more often, it comes up more. And that is talking about neurodivergence, not only with your child, but also with other children who maybe do not have any neurodivergence at all and just want to know about their peers.
Yeah, this is a really interesting episode. I'm so glad that we decided to discuss this because, you know, the worst thing that as a mom you want is for your either, you know, non-neurodivergent child or your neurodivergent child feeling, you know, isolated, feeling like they don't fit in. And for example, in my situation, so my eldest daughter has ADHD, and so outwardly everything looks fine, and she's very good at socializing and communicating. So everything looks, you know, perfectly normal, except her struggles are a little bit more private and behind the scenes. And so as a mum of one child who has ADHD and another child who doesn't, I want my ADHD kid to feel, you know, like she's just taken for herself and people aren't judging her or leaving her out. And then for my kid who hasn't got ADHD, I want her to be empathetic towards other people that do. So what's interesting about your situation, because you and I chat all the time, and you told me something really sweet, and I thought this is such a great thing that all of us mums should do. You are already teaching your youngest about your eldest's differences and about other people's differences. So talk to me about that. Like, what do those conversations look like with your youngest?
Yeah. So for those tuning in who maybe aren't a regular listener, I have two daughters like Claire. One is 2 and one is almost 10. And my older daughter is on the autism spectrum. And she's been diagnosed since she was a toddler, probably around 2.5, 3 years old was when we started really getting that diagnosis in place. And so I've had a really long time of getting used to her behaviors. The things that, she might do differently are very normalized to me because that's just the way my daughter is. But when we brought in her sister, when she started kind of realizing there were some differences, it's been interesting to watch her navigate that because to her, that is normal as well. But because we go to so many outside activities like story time and play groups, and she sees so many other types of children, she's realizing that there are some differences. And I notice her shift her behavior with her sister versus maybe say a peer that's 2 or 3. And it's so crazy because she's so little. Like it starts
Mm.
so little when they have knowledge about differences. So, we started with in my household, it's pretty routine to talk about differences in people. I have a lot of books that talk about people that have different physical attributes or
Mhm.
different mental capacities or delays or neurodivergence. We have a lot of just diversity in what we talk about as far as like learning materials. And then when it comes to media, when I started bringing in TV time and allowing her some screen time, I was very careful to choose shows and like learning type of things that bring that same awareness to differences. And
Mm.
so we've been talking about it a lot, especially right now because we've been doing a lot more TV time because mommy needs to clean up the house and maybe go pee or take a shower. Like, it's been one of those things. And one of the things we've been using lately is Sesame Street. So,
Mm.
Sesame Street's been around for a really long time. We're actually cracking into the old school Sesame Street recently, like from the 70s.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
it's on Prime if you have Amazon Prime, but it's been really fun to watch kind of the later episodes because there's a character on the show that has autism. Her name is Julia, and they talk about it on the show in a way that I feel really good about it. And so my daughter, my 2-year-old's using the word autism and will
Mm.
say, yeah, Julia has autism and so does sister. Julia and sister have autism. And it's like very much like this is just the thing. And the way they talk about it on the show is kind of the way I wish everyone talked about it, where it's very inclusive. It talks about the ways that they're the same and the ways that they're different from their peers in a way that makes everything feel very normalized. And I think because of that, it's very much like, oh yeah, some people have red hair, some people have black, some people have autism, some people don't. Like that's the way my toddler views it.
So, I mean, I'm just when I listen to you, you're. I always say this to you. You're the grown up in the room. It's, it's. Oh my God, you're inspiring to me. I just love how you, at Rennie's early age of 2, you've already started explaining this to her. So then, I guess your hope is that when she starts school, that she, if she comes across people like Stella or people with disabilities, that she's just going to accept them and take it in a stride rather than it be, maybe a little uncomfortable or, her being, I don't know, intimidated in some way. I mean, I guess that's what
Yeah.
you're hoping to achieve here, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is I'm teaching Rennie about autism at the same time I'm teaching my daughter Stella about her own autism. So,
Mm,
alongside books and media and things like that, we talk about it often. Like it's just something we bring in. Like I talk about her dad being a farmer a lot. We talk about Stella and her autism and autistic adults a lot. I find it really helpful to talk about people that have done amazing things that have autism.
yeah.
We talk about talents that Stella has that other kids maybe don't have that same talent because of her enhanced focus in certain areas. And I also, to that same point, Claire, of like when she gets to school, I'm making sure that we bring people who have differences into our home and having her learn about those people outside of Stella. So
Mm.
we've made an effort to befriend families in Stella's class or, people that, have autism. There's one of my friends has children. She has 3 of them and they're all on the spectrum, but they're all presenting differently because that's how it is.
Yeah.
Everybody on the spectrum's a little different.
Hmm.
And it's been fun to watch her interact with those kids, like Rennie and also Stella, and we talk about their sameness, you know. For instance, I'm going to use a fake name, but like, oh hey, look, Susie really is so happy. Look at, she's spinning. Susie spins when she's happy. What do you do when you're happy, Rennie? And she'll say, I smile. And I go, exactly. Like, we all do different things when we're happy. And it's just enough to say, hey, we're all the same, but we're kind of different. And I'm just laying the groundwork for those longer conversations when we talk about um, things that she might incur in like adult life slash chill, like when they go to school and things like that.
So in my house, so my eldest has ADHD, and as I've said, she doesn't necessarily present like she's any different at all. So what we're doing is with her younger sister, who is 2 years younger than Sophia. She actually has started coming home. She's just started middle school, and she'll say to me, "Oh, mum, my friend so and so, she has ADHD too." And she said, "You know what, mum? Because I, understand about it, and because my sister has it, she said I can almost identify some character traits, and it's normal to me, so I know how to deal with my friend when maybe she's feeling overwhelmed." And maybe she's having a big reaction to things. So I do think that having a sibling that is on the spectrum in one way or another actually creates empathy in the other sibling or siblings who maybe, don't have that particular neurodivergence.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that she mentioned when they're having a hard time, because it's not
Mm,
all, look at how happy Susie is.
yeah.
Sometimes there are big upsets, whether those be internal for folks who maybe don't need as many, helpful accommodations, or
Mm,
external where maybe they're having a hard time outwardly. Maybe we've incurred like meltdowns during a play date. Like one of the children, or maybe my child, might have a meltdown, and that can look very different for each kid. But for Stella, that's a lot of like hitting and stomping, kind of getting away from other people. And it's very outward. And,
mm.
we just go ahead and navigate that. And it's something that's normal for Rennie to watch. So my hope is that she gets older, it's that sometimes people have a hard time, and we just need to give them a little bit of space and allow them to process in their own unique way. That's the
Mhm.
message I'm hoping she gets. But other than those meltdown behaviors, we treat Stella pretty much the same as we treat Rennie, unless there's an accommodation that really needs to happen for her to be enjoying something at the same level. They get treated the same. They get punished for the same things. They have to eat the same foods. Like, everything's very much like you guys are on the same playing field. But there are certain spaces where sister needs a little bit of extra help.
So tell me about your eldest who has autism. She's now in a mainstream class. Tell
Yeah.
me about maybe the reaction from some of the other kids in a class who are like mainstream kids.
Yeah, well, it comes up because my daughter has some sensory issues when there's like a lot of noises going on.
Mm,
And at her school, like where they line up, there is kind of there's a lot of buildings that kind of make an echoey. And so she hears things so much louder than other people. So she'll
yeah,
often need to wear headphones when she goes to line up for class, just because of that extra echo. And then there's a lot of kids talking and chattering, and the bells ringing, and it's a lot going on, even for
yeah,
me, but for her
yeah, yeah,
especially.
yeah.
So there's been a couple times where children have been lined up with her, and I usually stay till they lined up the first week of school. Now she's on her own, but I would see them ask about it. And one of the children, there was a little girl behind her, and she said, "How come she has to wear those?" And I said, "Oh, she doesn't have to, but it makes her feel a little bit more comfortable." Stella has autism, and for her, that could mean that these noises in this area are a little bit too loud because she hears everything a lot better than we do.
Yeah,
And that was enough for them. And I also was not the teacher or like having more time to talk about it, but it comes up for us because of those external ways.
yeah,
Whereas like before this year, if she was around peers, it might have been on the playground. And when she doesn't need to have those on, you wouldn't know her from any other kid. It wouldn't be very obvious. So we have been having conversations with her her peers, and I'm talking to her teacher about finding ways to educate the kids because in April it's Autism Awareness Month, and I would love to bring that to the school and share a little bit more about the differences.
Yeah, as you should. So there's two things going on here. There's
Yeah.
this is what I'd like to to achieve from our discussion today. So what can mums do to help their regular child, a child who isn't on the spectrum in one way or another, be empathetic to kids who are? So that's the first thing I want us to try and address, so that our listeners, after listening to this, can go away and actually have some tools in their hands ready to chat with their non-divergent kid about. So
Yeah.
what can we do as mums to make sure that our kids are being very inclusive when it comes to other children who may be on the spectrum?
Yeah, I've got some tips. I'm excited to share. I think the biggest thing before we get into like the tangible tips is just encouraging in your motherhood to teach your children that not everyone experiences the world the same way they do.
Hmm.
And I think that that's kind of an overall, like, there are different places of, financial there differences. There's locational differences. There's so many ways that we all experience life differently from one another. And I try really hard in my motherhood to bring that in a way where everything's kind of just bundled. So like we talk about neurodiversity, but we also talk about maybe someone's in a wheelchair and how do they access life? How is that for them? And so there's all different ways to kind of look at that. But that would be my first, is to kind of make it a regular thing that you do, of kind of like looking at ways that things are different for people. But as far as like approaching it, like say you have a child who is going to school for the first time, or maybe has not incurred, but has had an experience with a child that's different. I think coming at it from a place of normalizing differences and being positive is helpful.
Hmm.
One thing that's really easy to say is everyone is different and all brains work differently. That's a really kind of general statement, but you can talk about things that they're good at. So say you're like, oh,
Hmm.
what are things that you are good at? And they'll say like, oh, I like drawing, or I like music. And you can say, yeah, and what are some things that are a little bit harder for you? And maybe there are certain subjects that they struggle in, or certain places of growth that they have. And you can talk about that as a leeway into, well, some people have differences as well. And for people who have different brains, they process the world differently. So things like art may be very easy for them, but maybe these other things are harder. And it kind of allows them to go, oh, they're kind of like me. Like I have these places where I'm good at things, and I have places where I'm not so good and I might need some help. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of like a step one.
Hmm.
Um, and then, talking about the differences, maybe some talk about the ways that we all learn differently, because even for any kid, like there's some people that really love to hear things out loud. And there's others that maybe need to read to themselves or write stuff down. When it comes to brainstorming, if you have an older kid, maybe some people prefer to take major notes and do a list, or when other people love a bubble diagram. Everyone's brains work differently. And so there's no right or wrong. It's just different.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. I think those are great tips. One thing I kind of struggle with, and I guess other mums may do as well, you're so trying to normalize other people's differences that sometimes, I would almost say, if we were walking past someone in a wheelchair, I want my kids to just see that as very normal, so I would never point it out. So are you saying that actually maybe pointing out differences and talking about them is actually the way to go, rather than just almost being blinkered to the fact that anyone has any differences? Because you're
Yeah.
meaning well, you're trying to just make everyone on the same playing field. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, totally. I think
Mm,
I think it's case by case, right? Because like
right.
for instance, I live in a rural area and we don't have a lot of diversity in skin color around here.
Hmm.
And so if say I'm trying to teach people about different ethnicities, I wouldn't be like, oh, look, there's a black man. Like that's weird. Like, you know what I mean? Like if my
Okay,
child
but don't
asked
do
about
that.
it, like maybe I might point it out. But
Yeah.
I think that there are ways to talk about it, like say someone's over there So I've had experiences where maybe I'm at a Target and I'll see someone who's using a motor cart or who's using a wheelchair to get around, and I'll point it out and say, "Oh, look, there's a man using a wheelchair. Do you know why people use wheelchairs?" And I'll say, just like in your book, like he uses that to get around. It helps him because he can't walk. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
just, this is why he uses it. This is just like your book. And that's it. Just like I point out, cute little babies and other things in the store, I don't make it like a look at that man who's so different. And you can talk about that with anything, like different bodies, different hair types. You definitely wouldn't say that to them, but you can recall it later. Like maybe when you get home and you're doing your cuddle time or whatever. How was your day? Oh, we went here, we went there. Oh, do you remember when we were at Target and we saw so and so? Yeah, what did you think of that? And just having a conversation about it.
Hmm, that's interesting. So my mum uses a rollator, I think they're called, to get around. So she has mobility issues, and it's funny because I do think kids are very accepting of differences, actually,
They
and I
are.
think they accept them very quickly. So my girls help my mum. They just know when my mum comes to stay, they need to help Nanny get around. They'll load her rollator into the car. They'll help her get into the car, and they just do it now. It's second nature, and they're not embarrassed to be out, walking with her with a roller. There's nothing. It's just normal to them, and
Yeah.
so that's my observations. They are very accepting as kids, even as teenagers. They are, and so
Yeah. But
yeah, I love
to that
that.
point, Claire,
Yeah,
I think that is so key, is that kids are pretty much moldable and they are
yeah,
very
yeah.
accepting of other people. And when
Mhm.
you encounter a child who is not that way, there is usually someone in their life who is not that way.
Oh,
And that's
100%.
been taught. So, yeah, and obviously there are mishaps, right? I can remember a time my friend's toddler went, "Mommy, that man is fat." The mom
Oh
was like,
God.
"Oh," she like went under the table
So
basically.
embarrassing. I think
And
we've all
it's
been
like,
there with kids saying something embarrassing.
totally. But they're doing it out of like a curiosity place. And so
Yeah.
obviously not time and place to say that, but again, there's that special one-on-one time you have with your kids to talk about the day, and I think that's the place to put it, and we talk about what's acceptable to say out loud. And a good rule we follow at our house is if someone can't change something in about 5 seconds, we don't point it out.
Oh,
So
I love
if
that.
someone has something in their teeth, probably tell them. If they have a booger in their nose, you should probably quietly tell them. But if it's something like their body size or an ailment or something that's more permanent, we don't tell them that.
And now a quick break in the Momversation to bring you a word from today's sponsor.
Raise your hand if you love shopping for jeans. Well, if you're listening with a hand up, then you're in the minority because for most of us, it's a nightmare.
Waist gaps, unclear sizing, fluorescent lights, unflattering fits. I am sweating just thinking about it. What if we could skip all of that and just have the perfect pair magically transported to us?
Well, that's where today's sponsor, Neem's Jeans, comes in. This women-owned business was created by someone who understands the struggle and offers custom denim jeans made to your exact body measurements, delivered right to your door.
Neem's Jeans gives you the perfect fit every time, guaranteed, and offers inclusive sizings for every body. Moms, you are one of a kind, and your jeans should be too. Visit neemsjeans.com and use code MOMVERSATION15 at checkout for 15% off your order.
That's NEEMSjeans.com and code Momversation15 for your special savings. Okay, so what about then? Let's come at it from a perspective of we're both mums who've got kids who in some way are neurodivergent. So then what do we do to empower our kids who have differences to navigate the world when they are a little bit different? What do we do to them? Because I feel that building up their confidence is key, especially when they're around kids that don't necessarily have the same struggles as they do.
Well, I think just giving them some tools to advocate for themselves. So talking
Mhm.
to them about accommodations that they might need in certain situations and empowering them to ask for those things, and that being okay, it being something that you can do. A lot of times for younger kids, when you're explaining autism, I've encountered like toddlers thinking, oh, she has autism, meaning she's sick. And then, we have the whole conversation about, autism is just like a different thing. But then in class, sometimes those accommodations, things like maybe having an aide or having extra time on a test or being able to go in another room to do certain things or having the work adjusted to their learning style, you might encounter other kids being upset about that. Like, how come she gets to do that and I don't get to do that? And then having your child explain or having the teacher get in there, but like, hey, I need this because of this. This is something I need to learn at the same level you're learning. Have them be empowered to ask for things, but also know that they're not getting more than someone else. They're leveling the playing field. It's not about what's fair. It's about how can we all access this same thing.
So I remember my eldest being really uncomfortable when she got her IEP because she thought that that was giving her an unfair advantage to the other
Yeah.
kids. And I said to her, no, it's not. What it is it's leveling the playing field, because what's not fair is that you're expected to complete a test in the same amount of time when your brain processes information differently. And it's, not okay that you have the same amount of time to turn in assignments because, again, you process things differently. And similarly, you may need to be in a quiet space because the classroom is just too loud because, again,
Yeah.
ADHD, there's a lot of, issues with sensors, like you said, with
Distraction. Like, yeah, absolutely.
totally. And so, I mean, honestly, Sophia could probably do with wearing headphones in class as well. But so what I said to her, instead of her thinking that, she was embarrassed because people are going to think she's getting more than they are and it's not fair to the other kids, what I tried to do and turn it around is, well, the current situation is not fair to you, because that's like
Ooh.
asking you to run a race. Like, say you were in a running race and you're being held back for the first 10 seconds and then you're allowed to run with the others. There's no way you're going to finish at the same time because it's just impossible. And so I do think that, for me, with my situation, focusing on her strengths is key,
Yeah.
because I think there is a tendency with kids who are on the spectrum, especially with things like ADHD, because they feel that everything's a struggle. They actually interpret that as potentially them not being very smart, when it isn't that. It's just their brains are functioning slightly different to an average kid. And
Yeah.
so I've done a lot of work, and so has her team at school and a therapist, really encouraging her to focus on what she is good at rather than focusing on the areas that she struggles in, because that in itself can become overwhelming and then it sends her into this downward spiral. So I
Yeah.
think, for mums with kids who have who either have autism or they're on the spectrum, the ADHD spectrum, like my kid, I think for us, we just need to empower our kids to the greatest extent that we can, so that they feel, that they are at the same table as the other kids and they have every right to have those accommodations potentially, and that it's nothing to be embarrassed about. The other interesting thing I'm just going to say while I'm talking
Yeah.
about this, when we were going through the whole IEP thing for my eldest daughter, the high school said to me, and they actually said to her too, because she felt like she was going to be so different to everyone and she was going to be the odd one out. They said, and I can't remember the exact statistic, but a really high number of kids at that high school, and I guess this is reflective of most high schools across the country, have ADHD in some form or another, or they have an IEP. There is an IEP for some reason or another for hundreds of kids at that school. And they said it
Yeah.
might not, you don't know that because obviously, we're discreet and we're not trying to make it necessarily obvious that everyone has extra provisions. But believe us, there are hundreds of kids at this school that you do not know have IEPs because they need accommodations for various different things. So it is interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, and that's just the diagnosed children, right? So there's a
Yes,
lot of people, because
yes.
neurodiversity is such a huge, huge thing.
Oh, it
And
is. Very cool.
everyone's a little virgin. You know what I mean? Like everybody has little
Yeah,
pockets of places where they can go, oh yeah, that's me.
yeah.
I think that we're seeing a resurgence of that. diagnosis come up more and more often is because we
Mm.
have more access to information and what it looks like in different types of people. For instance, with autism, for so long, they didn't recognize autism in girls. There would be, yeah, because it's harder to diagnose them.
Oh,
They
all right.
specifically, little girls tend to do what's called masking more, which is mean look at other peers, see what they're doing, and then copy those behaviors, even if they don't understand the behavior. And so, yeah, a lot of, unless there's like a major verbal delay, a lot of children that are on the spectrum get delayed diagnoses like way, way later. And there's a lot of people right now that are getting diagnosed as adults. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
think there are so many more differences in each person. And I think teachers are starting to kind of teach to that too. They're changing the way that they teach in a way that makes sense for everyone. But yeah, I love that you talked to her about it being fair to her to have these accommodations, because
Yeah.
one of the ways that I explain it to other kids is that, maybe you're trying to reach the top shelf of something and you're too short, but your teacher's not, and they can grab it, and that kid's not, and they can grab it, and everybody else can grab it but you. Is it unfair for you to use a stool? Like, no, everybody
Exactly.
has access to this thing, but you need the stool to get access to. And that's
Mhm.
the same analogy as your race. And so, when you put it that way, I think it helps them advocate for themselves. And Stella's learning. When she was little, she couldn't tell me, "Hey, it's too loud out here. I need my headphones." I would just know because she started slamming things. She was like not happy.
Right.
But now she can say, "Hey, I need my headphones." And that's really helpful. Or I need a number line for math, or I need this. And she's able to tell me what's going on and how she might need help. But yeah, getting back into the way that peers might view it, there are a lot of behaviors, specifically with autism, that may be outward and they don't know how to navigate that. I think that a lot of children, we're all so different, but most people who are neurodivergent and have autism, they usually have some behaviors like stemming, which is kind of like a repetitive behavior they might be doing to calm down. A lot of kids rock back and forth. A lot of kids tap. My daughter opens books and then kind of taps them and then turns the page and then opens another book. And so she'll always have a book in her hand because she's just using it to tap. There's a lot of different sensitivities to light, to sounds, and they may be different levels of sensitivity. So maybe you turn on light too fast and the child covers their eyes and it's a lot of pain that they feel. Um,
Mm.
Talking to them about what that could look like is helpful, just so they're not caught off guard by other people. And most of all, teach them that different is okay and you can still be friends with these kids. Teaching them how to communicate with other children that have differences is so helpful. And it's interesting because when Stella's in our mainstream class, there are two little girls that no one's told them to do this. No one's asked this of them. No one's taught them anything about autism, but they have latched on to Stella and they invite her to things, like, "Hey, we're playing Candyland. Do you want to come play, Stella?" They will, when they're at a field trip recently, the little girl tapped Stella and asked her if she needed help with anything. Like, it's just, you can tell that their parents have either had someone on the spectrum in their life or have made a major effort to teach their child empathy and
Mm.
kindness. And that makes a huge difference to Stella, having a
Mm.
child in her class who bridges the gap between, "I want to play with you, but I don't know how to ask for that." Stella can't say, "Hey, I want to play," but she would love to play with you.
Oh.
And that child inviting her really helps. So when you have a child who maybe has a peer that is different, letting that child know, like, "Hey, you can ask little Johnny if he wants to play. He may not answer right away. Like, maybe asking, waiting a pause, and then if there's a long enough pause, maybe rephrasing it. I know for Stella, when she was younger, she couldn't answer anything but yes or no. So it'd be like, "Hey, do you want to go to the park?" And she couldn't say like, "Yes, I'd like to go to the park." She'd have to say, "Do you want to go park yes or park no?" And then we'd kind of hold our hand, "Park yes or park no." And she'd be able
Mm.
to tell us. So I've taught some of her friends who are not on the spectrum, to do that. And now they interact with her in that way. So she's got children that are on the spectrum that are friends that are, kind of parallel playing with her. But then there's a lot of mainstream kids that play with her too, because they've learned how to be kind.
Well, I've got to say, I know having a child on the spectrum in whatever way that looks like can be really, really challenging for the child, for the mom, for the rest of the family. But one thing I will say, I do think it builds empathy both with any siblings that you have. Even me as a mom, I'm more empathetic to situations that I don't think I would have been empathetic towards before I had, my eldest. And similarly, I think she's more empathetic to other people as well, because she
Yeah.
can see that, well, I struggle too, and I can see that they struggle. Maybe it's a different struggle, but they're struggling nonetheless. So both with my, regular kid and my eldest who has ADHD, both of them I feel are more empathetic as a result of my eldest being a little different. And that brings us to the end of another episode of the Momversation Club.
And if you've enjoyed today's show, which we hope you have, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review. Your support helps us reach even more moms.
And we hope today's episode has helped you to feel more seen and less alone in motherhood. Until next time, bye for now.